What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of our NFL season preview. If you're staying with us through this point, we're about halfway, or actually over halfway through the NFL teams for the 2022 season. I believe we're on team 16 at this point. We're getting into teams that can have a winning record versus a losing record. And today we're going to do the Las Vegas Raiders. If you've seen these episodes before, we do last season's breakdown, off-season breakdown, additions, subtractions, what we can expect based on their schedule this year, and get a quick preview of what your team may or may not be doing this upcoming season. If you like what I'm doing here, please hit that like button, hit the comment, discuss what you like, what you don't like, and please hit that subscribe button so we can keep doing this. So I'll highlight as I go. So we'll start with last season. Last season, the Raiders, they were 10-7. They started off 3-0, then they went 3-7 for a bad stretch, and then they won four straight, which included that overtime chaotic game against the Chargers that got them into the playoffs. Ended up losing that first game in the playoffs against the Bengals. They had Gus Bradley cover three all day, every day, probably led to their demise. But anyway, so that's what happened. In the offseason with their coaching, they moved on from Gus Bradley. They got Patrick Graham in there now. They also have a new head coach. They had the interim head coach last year, and now they have Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator from New England. He's in there, and they also have a new GM. So a little bit of swinging of the positions in the offseason as far as the coaching staff, but we'll get into the draft and what they did in the draft this year. So they lost their first few picks due to the Davante Adams trade, which was a huge trade that we'll get into momentarily. But their first pick was in the third round, and they used it on Dylan Parham, the guard out of Memphis. The offensive line was obviously their weakest point of their team last year. This guy can come in and play tackle and guard, and he should get some playing time based on the lack of talent that they have on this offensive line. So then the fourth round, pick 122, they took Zamir White. They got him fourth on the depth chart here. The running back out of Georgia. I mean, solid pickup, especially for this running back room that has Josh Jacobs, who's always injured, Kenyon Drake, who's coming off a broken ankle. So Zamir White may get some playing time, especially in this running back room. Follow that up with their other fourth round pick at 126. They got Neil Farrell, the defensive tackle out of LSU. I mean, he was solid last year for LSU. I believe he had 45 tackles, nine and a half tackles for loss, and 2 sacks last year. So a solid output. He can come in and give him some depth on this defensive line. His weight is what scared people and made him fall that far. He was 338 at his last weigh-in, so that kind of scared people off from him. So then we'll get into their free agency and their offseason with their trades. The main thing was the Davante Adams trade. They go out and get the best wide receiver in the NFL, Derek Carr's college teammate. They're going to pair them up again and try to wreak havoc on this AFC West that's going to wreak havoc on them and on each other, basically. Like I said, he's a clear-cut number one in the league. He had a 92 or better PFF grade each of the last 2 seasons. He's increased his yards per route run in each of the last 6 seasons. So everything you look about him, he's just great at. He's improving still, even though he's getting late 20s, early 30s. I don't know his exact age, but a little bit older. He got the contract he wanted, but I mean they're getting their number one. They're going all in right now. They followed. Well, I think this happened first, but they got Chandler Jones from Arizona. Chandler Jones, pairing him with Max Crosby on the other end, going to cause hell in the AFC West. I mean, it is going to be crazy for sure on this D line, along with every other D line in the AFC West. But he has 2 All Pros to his name, and he has a pass rush grade of almost 88 or higher in his last 2 healthy seasons. Injuries have been a problem as of late, but if he can stay healthy, he's great for this team. Only other key addition they made was Anthony Averett. They brought him in right here from Baltimore, and they also traded for Rock Ya-Sin, which we'll get into their losses this offseason, and that ties right into it because they lost Yannick Ngakoue. They traded him for Rock Ya-Sin because, I mean, they needed some cornerback depth for sure, and they could afford to lose some D-line play, especially adding Chandler Jones. They did lose Nick K. Can't Can't ever say his name correctly. The linebacker. They lost Corey Littleton, and then they also lost Carl Nassib. So a little bit of turnaround, not a lot of turnaround, just a lot of big names that they brought in for sure. So now we'll get straight into their strengths. I mean, this team was on the cusp last year. We'll discuss what held them back last year. They had a few weapons for sure with Davante Adams. But their strengths include having a franchise quarterback. A lot of teams can't say they have a franchise quarterback. Now, looking at this, I didn't realize Derek Carr's been in the league for this long, drafted in 2014. But he's proven that he can perform under pressure and carry a team. I mean, he's not the reason, he's not what's holding this team back from taking that next step for sure. He ranked number one on throws between the numbers last year, 22nd on throws outside the numbers. But now they bring in Davante Adams, who you just picture all those throws from Aaron Rodgers being outside the numbers, right into the breadbasket of his hands, outside the numbers, only where he can get it. So this is only going to improve what they do outside the numbers for sure. The crazy thing is, even though he was 22nd in throws outside the hash marks, he had the second most 20 plus yard passes last year, pass attempts, sorry, with 78. So he was throwing the ball. He was trying to push it downfield, things he hadn't done before. He did it last year. Another strength of this team is that they have weapons galore. You look at this offense. Derek Carr, obviously Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, who broke out last year, got the new contract now, Darren Waller, who they got from Baltimore a few years back, won the top 5 tight end, number 1 wide receiver, this running back room with Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, now Zamir White. I mean, Jacobs, he had the 4th most missed tackles caused per rush attempt last year. So, I mean, if he's on the field, he can make people miss. That's for sure. You pair that in with another strength that they have, which is obviously their D-line. You look at their 2 outside linebackers that's going to be putting pressure on the opposing quarterbacks with Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Max Crosby had the breakout year last year. Chandler is a little bit older, but he still has all-pro caliber, all-pro talent that he can greatly contribute to this D-line. They got Bilal Nichols, Vernon Butler. I mean, this is all great players. Denzel Perryman. I mean, these are all people that are above average for sure. Still got Cleveland Farrell. I mean, that was kind of a failed project, but he's still there. Possible depth for sure. Another strength, in my opinion, is the fact that Gus Bradley's out. We all know he ran so much zone coverage, and they were the least blitzing team by a long shot last year. All the numbers show how little they blitzed. They just sat back in coverage. Offenses knew what they were going to do and just picked them apart. So that was their weakness, but now the strength is the fact that he's out. So now let's go over their weaknesses. What held them back last year was their offensive line. Sorry, their offensive line was it the worst in the NFL? I mean, you could argue that for sure. I mean, John Simpson was there. Alex Leatherwood, they were 2 of the worst and 2 of the lowest graded guards per PFF last year. So if you have 2 of your 5 starters being the lowest at their position, it's not going to bode well for your quarterback in your run game. So I said earlier that Josh Jacobs was 4th in missed tackles calls per rush attempt, but yet they still were 25th in yards per carry. So if he would have had any resemblance of a average offensive line, there's no telling what their yards per carry would have truly been. The offensive line, another problem was the fact they had 7.3 penalties and they are not disciplined at all. Having that many penalties, which was next to the most in the NFL, just not going to get wins for this team. So you had the offensive line that was horrible. They didn't do much to protect Carr this offseason. The right side, going back to them, they allowed more pressures than any other right side in the league, 124 last year. At least they have Denzel Good that they brought in, and I mean, he has to be no worse than his predecessors that were in these positions. Leatherwood, you look at him, he had a 31.8 pass block grade. He allowed 8 sacks, 67 pressures, had 16 penalties. So, I mean, the good thing is he can only improve. I mean, he can't get any worse. Secondary is also a thing that somewhat held him back at times last year. I mean, it started off well. They did, you just look at, you look at the numbers. 26 in opponent points per game, giving up 25.8. They only had 14 takeaways last year, and they had the fewest interceptions in the NFL. So, I mean, if they're not turning the ball over, I mean, it's probably partially due to that cover zone, that cover three zone scheme that they always ran on defense. Um, the good thing looking at it this year is that they have several players now that have the talent to at least produce or outperform expectations, especially when you compare it to last year. And then they also have Trayvon Murray back. So, I mean, good things there for sure. I'm sorry, not him. Trayvon Mullen Jr., sorry. Uh, so, I mean, we can discuss the outlook on both sides of the ball. I mean, we already went through it really quick with both sides. I mean, the offense is going to depend on the offensive line. Defense is probably going to depend on the back seven, but definitely not the front four is going to be pressuring like crazy. So now we'll look at their projected wins. What was surprising is that they were projected to win just 8.5, which is less than or the same than teams such as the Vikings that are 8.5 or 9, and the Dolphins are 9 wins. So we'll look at their schedule and we'll go week by week and discuss what we can expect um, wins or loss in a quick breakdown of the matchup. So week one, they unfortunately play the Chargers. What's going to be a problem for this team in the AFC West is every other team has outstanding D lines or players that can produce pressure. And you look at this with their offensive line, they're going to have such an issue blocking Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. I can't see them overcoming that, to be honest with you. Thankfully, they go week two, they play the Cardinals, no Nook. And I mean, I don't think they can score without Nook. Marquise Brown is not going to pick up that slack. I feel like the Cardinals are going to regress. They're going to be more that second half team that they were last year, and the Raiders will get the win here. Week three, they play the Titans. D line is improved. They slow up Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry maybe getting to the age where he can regress. He's getting older, and especially in the running back positions. And their wide receivers are absolutely horrible. So another win. Week four, they play the Broncos. Again, I'm worried about the D line, especially them having Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory. At bare minimum, I expect them to split this series with the Broncos. Russell Wilson, I don't expect him to be the Russell Wilson of old. Still looking for some changes, growing pains with the new group that he's in with, and I feel like he's going to run for his life against this D line. So another win, 3-1, going into Monday Night Football against the Chiefs. They could split with the Chiefs, but Mahomes has got to prove. I mean, he's gonna prove it. I think he's still got to prove it with his new weapons. But I mean, Mahomes is Mahomes. So until proven otherwise, I feel like the Chiefs are gonna be the leaders of this division. They have a bye at week 6, which is horrible to me, being that early of a bye and then having to play 12 games straight, go straight into the playoffs. But thankfully, after the bye, they play the Texans. We don't have to discuss the Texans. We know they're going to win that game. Play the Saints in week 8. Saints D is no joke, and I mean against this offensive line again, which is going to be their downfall, and these cornerbacks that can match up well. They do have Davante, but I feel like the Saints get the win here, especially being in New Orleans. We know what the Superdome can do to opposing teams. Week 9 they play the Jags. The Jags hype train's going crazy. They're up, but not this much. Not enough to beat the Raiders. Sorry, win. Week 10 they play the Colts. Matt Ryan can carry this team, improve compared to what they had with Carson Wentz, but the D's not good enough to defeat the Raiders. I feel like the Raiders get another win here. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like they'll get a split due to the fact that Chubb and Randy Gregory is going to cause problems for this offensive line and Derek Carr. Thankfully, week 12, they followed it up with the Seahawks. Seahawks could be playing for the number 1 pick. Not much to discuss there. And then they play the Chargers. We discussed earlier. I mean, I say it again and again, but it's that offensive line against these front fours that's going to cause them problems. Then you follow that up with Thursday Night Football, and they play Aaron Donald. Good luck to you. They better triple teaming to have these half-competent offensive linemen be able to do something against him. But then the last few weeks of the schedule, it does start to ease up. They play the Patriots on Sunday Night Football in Week 15. That offense is not even going to be close to what it was last year. It was average last year. And Mac Jones has no weapons, not even an offensive coordinator. Steelers on Saturday Night Football. Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett is not going to be able to carry this team, especially against this defensive line. We know the Steelers' offensive line issues. They didn't do much to improve their offensive line. They did more than the Raiders, but not enough to get the win for sure. They then play the Niners. And with the Niners, I mean, I feel like this is where the Raiders need to get on a roll, and they need to carry this into playing this Week 17 game, especially if they want a chance to make the wild card or even have a chance to push for this division title. The only thing that worries me about this game is George Kittle. and the inability of this team, the Raiders, to cover him. But I still think the Raiders get the win here. Again, Week 18, discuss the Chiefs until proven otherwise. I can't say the Raiders are going to beat them. They have closed the gap with them losing Tyreek and kind of building a little more for the future. I know they're all in still, the Chiefs, but lost Tyreek, got growing pains probably, and the Raiders bringing in the players they brought. They closed the gap for sure, but until proven otherwise, the Raiders will have to take the L here. So with that said, I have the Raiders going 10-7 this year. And definitely competing for a wild card position at 10-7. Anything can happen. Any injuries in this division, it could flip everything upside down. Raiders, if you told me they win the division, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But as of right now, I have them going 10-7. So then we'll go back up and continue with the rest. Top players, they're just unfortunately in a bad division. If they're in any other division, they're probably projected division winners in 4 of the other 7 divisions. Top players in their position, I look at each positional player who can be a top 5 at their position, who could be a top 10. So we have some easy top 5 candidates. Davante Adams, obviously. Darren Waller, obviously. Derek Carr, he could push to be a top 5 quarterback for sure. And then Max Crosby, Chandler Jones. If in the season you tell me they're top 5 in sacks, wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Looking at top 10, all of these for sure better be top 10. Except maybe Chandler Jones or Max Crosby, if we'll see. But the rest, they better be top 10 if the team wants to be successful for sure. MVP candidates, if Derek Carr can carry the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, to the division title, then he can 100% be an MVP candidate for sure. Did not highlight that as I was going. So now, also, most improved. Who's the candidate to be a most improved player on this team? I gotta say Alex Leatherwood, and that's just solely based on how bad he was last year. He can only go up. If he doesn't go up this year, his starting days are over probably in the NFL. He was god awful last year. So easy most improved candidate for sure. Best and worst outcomes for this team. The offensive line plays mediocre. And I mean that's going to be the biggest selling point or flipping of the switch for them in this division. If the offensive line is average, I feel like they win the division. Simple as that. Worst outcome: offensive line can't protect anybody. The Davante Derek Carr duo isn't as much of a threat as we thought it would be. Chandler Jones is injured. The secondary is still not great, and they don't even make the wild card, especially in this tough AFC West. All right, biggest drop off candidate for me. I mean, hopefully not, but I worry about Chandler Jones and his age. At 32 years old in the edge position, he could fall off at any time. Hopefully not this year. I don't expect it, but if I had to choose someone, it would be him. And most intriguing thing for this team, I've mentioned it so much in this video, but it's almost like they're the X factor, and it's the entire offensive line. You look at this entire offensive line, they got one solid starter. Outside of that, I mean, are they going to be a bottom 5 offensive line again, or can they at least get the top 20? If they get the top 20, it can change everything for the future of this franchise, especially this year going into the playoffs. And it will, if they're not top 20, it will be the reason that keeps them from winning the division. So that's the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost said Oakland again. Run through them, got them going 10-7. Let me know what you agree with, what you don't agree with, and we'll continue putting these videos out until we hit the NFL kickoff in not many days from now. So catch you on the next one. Hit that subscribe button.